My name is Peyton, and I'm 37 years old. For the better part of 2 decades, my life has been a carefully constructed balancing act. A fulfilling career in marketing, 2 incredible children, Lily, 10, and Ethan, 7, and a loving husband, Mark. We have a beautiful home in the suburbs, the kind with a well-manicured lawn and a swing set in the backyard. From the outside, it probably looks idyllic. But inside these walls, a silent battle has been raging, a slow, corrosive erosion of peace that reached its breaking point just a few months ago. The day it all shattered, the day I truly understood the depth of the problem, started like any other Saturday. The kids were squabbling over a video game, the smell of Mark's coffee was brewing, and then, a booming voice from the living room, sharp and laced with an anger that was becoming all too familiar, ripped through the morning calm. "Can you two ever be quiet?" it bellowed. It was my brother, David, and he was yelling at my kids again. My heart sank, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't just about David's temper, it was about my mother's unwavering defense of him, her constant refrain of, "Don't be hard on him." It was about the slow surrender of my own sanity, the creeping resentment that threatened to devour my family from the inside out. If you've ever felt like your home isn't your own, like you're walking on eggshells in your own sanctuary, then you know exactly how I feel. Stick around because this isn't just my story, it might be yours too. David moved in with us 6 months ago. 6 months. It feels like 6 years. He lost his job, his third in as many years, and my mother, bless her ever-optimistic heart, suggested he stay with us, just until he gets back on his feet. I remember standing in our kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to her gentle reasoning. "He needs support, Peyton. You and Mark have plenty of space." And we did, technically. A spare bedroom that had been designated as Mark's home office, now transformed into David's temporary living quarters. Mark, ever the supportive husband, saw my hesitation and offered a reassuring squeeze of my hand. "He's family, honey. We can help him out." I wanted to believe it. I truly did. David had always been a bit of a wanderer, a dreamer with grand plans that rarely materialized. But he was my older brother, and family meant something. So we welcomed him in with open arms and, in my case, a healthy dose of trepidation. The initial weeks were manageable. He mostly kept to himself, spent a lot of time on his laptop, presumably looking for jobs. He'd occasionally offer to help with groceries or take out the trash, small gestures that lulled me into a false sense of security. I thought perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this was the turning point he needed. I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. The shift was subtle at first, then increasingly overt. The job applications seemed to dry up. The laptop was used more for streaming than searching. And the temper. Oh, the temper. It began with minor irritations, a sigh or a grumble if the kids were too loud during his afternoon naps. Then it escalated to sharp words and finally to full-blown yelling. Always at the kids. Never at Mark or me, not directly. It was always the children who bore the brunt of his frustrations. The quiet hum of our once peaceful home had been replaced by a constant undercurrent of tension, a barely perceptible tremor that vibrated through every room. It felt like living inside a fragile glass dome, one wrong move, one loud laugh, and it could all shatter. The first truly public eruption, the one that truly cemented the shift from challenging houseguest to unbearable burden, happened during a seemingly innocuous family dinner. We were all at the table, a rare occurrence lately, attempting to enjoy Mark's famous lasagna. Lily was recounting a story from school, her voice animated and joyful, when Ethan, in his typical 7-year-old fashion, interrupted with an excited, "And then she fell down." It wasn't malicious, just youthful exuberance. But David, who had been silently pushing his food around his plate, suddenly slammed his fork down. The clang echoed in the sudden silence. "Can you two just shut up?" he roared, his face contorted in a mask of anger. Lily's eyes welled up instantly, and Ethan flinched, shrinking in his chair. The lasagna, once a symbol of comfort, now sat between us, cold and unappetizing. Mark, usually so calm, stiffened beside me. My immediate instinct was to protect my children. "David, that is absolutely unacceptable." I snapped, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. David simply glared at me, then pushed his chair back violently and stormed off to his room, leaving the remnants of our shattered peace in his wake. The incident was a turning point. After that, the outbursts became more frequent, and the targets remained the same: Lily and Ethan. A dropped toy, a loud giggle during a movie, even just the sound of their playing in the backyard. Anything could trigger his rage. My children, once so vibrant and uninhibited, began to tiptoe around their own home. Lily, who used to sing and dance through the house, now whispered. Ethan, my boisterous little boy, played silently in his room. The light in their eyes, the carefree joy, was slowly dimming. I tried to talk to David, calmly at first, then with increasing desperation. Each conversation was met with defensiveness, denial, or a complete lack of empathy. They're just kids, David, I'd plead. They don't mean to bother you. He'd just shrug. They're too loud. They need to learn some respect. Respect? My 7-year-old needed to learn respect from a man who couldn't hold down a job and spent his days playing video games? The hypocrisy was suffocating. I started keeping the kids out of the house more, dragging them to parks, libraries, friends' houses. Anywhere to escape the oppressive atmosphere David created. Our once welcoming home had become a fortress I felt compelled to flee. The silence in our home was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of unspoken fear and frustration. A silence that screamed louder than any argument. Mark saw it too, of course. He'd witnessed the transformations in our children, the way they'd started to recoil from any sudden noise, the way they'd ask, "Is Uncle David in his room?" before venturing into the living room. We had countless hushed conversations in our bedroom after the kids were asleep, whispers filled with worry and growing anger. "We can't keep living like this, Peyton," he'd say, running a hand through his hair. "It's not fair to the kids." I knew he was right. We tried everything. Mark suggested David seek therapy. David scoffed. "I don't need a shrink. I need a job." I tried to set boundaries. "David, when the kids are playing, please try to be more patient." He'd agree half-heartedly, only to snap an hour later. The most frustrating part of all this, however, was my mother. She was and still is a force of nature in her own right. A sweet, gentle woman who, in her unwavering devotion to her firstborn, was completely blind to David's detrimental impact on our family. Every time I'd call her, desperate for support, for her to see what I was seeing, I'd be met with the same soft yet firm admonition. "Peyton, don't be so hard on him. He's going through a tough time." "Tough time, Mom?" I'd practically shriek into the phone, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "He's yelling at my children. My children are scared of him." Her voice would remain calm, almost serene. "He just needs a little understanding. He's under a lot of pressure." Pressure? What about the pressure on Mark and me, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for our kids while housing a volatile, unemployed man-child? What about the pressure on Lily and Ethan, whose childhood was being tainted by his presence? It felt like a constant betrayal. My own mother, the person who was supposed to be my strongest ally, was siding with David, effectively invalidating my pain and the fear in my children's eyes. It was a suffocating feeling, like being trapped between a rock and a hard place, with both sides demanding a piece of me. The guilt of even considering asking David to leave was immense, fueled by my mother's words. How could I turn my own brother out onto the street? But how could I continue to sacrifice my children's emotional well-being for the sake of his comfort? The conflict raged within me, a silent war that chipped away at my resolve every single day. Each morning felt like wading through treacle, the simple act of rising and facing the day a monumental effort, weighed down by the conflict that simmered constantly beneath the surface of our lives. The true breaking point wasn't a single explosive event, but a quiet, chilling moment that solidified my resolve. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, trying to focus on a difficult project, when I heard it. Not a shout, not a roar, but a low, guttural growl from the living room, followed by Lily's small, almost imperceptible whimper. I crept out of my office, my heart pounding in my chest. David was sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the TV, a video game controller in his hands. Lily was on the floor, trying to put together a Lego castle. A single Lego piece, a tiny red brick, had rolled under the couch, just out of her reach. "Can you get it for me, Uncle David?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. David didn't even look at her. He just emitted that low growl again, a sound of pure irritation. "Stop bothering me," he muttered, his eyes still fixed on the screen. Lily, my sweet, normally resilient Lily, didn't argue. She didn't ask again. She just slowly, painstakingly, tried to reach for the brick herself, stretching her small arm further and further, until her face was red with effort and frustration. And then she started to cry. Not a loud, attention-seeking cry, but a silent, defeated stream of tears that ran down her face as she struggled with the unyielding couch. David didn't notice. Or if he did, he chose to ignore it. He just continued to play his game, completely oblivious to the heartbreak unfolding at his feet. In that moment, watching my daughter's silent despair, something inside me snapped. It wasn't about the Lego brick. It was about her spirit, her innocence, being crushed by the indifference and cruelty of a man who was supposed to be family. It was about the slow, agonizing realization that my mother's pleas for understanding were actively harming my children. It was about seeing the tangible impact of his presence, not just in their fear, but in their quiet surrender. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply walked over, picked up the tiny red brick, and handed it to Lily. Her eyes, still brimming with tears, looked up at me, a flicker of relief and gratitude in them. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight, feeling her small body tremble. In that embrace, I made a promise to her, a silent vow that things were going to change. No matter how difficult, no matter how much it hurt, I would protect my children. The air in the house, once thick with tension, now felt charged with a different kind of energy. The quiet, unyielding determination of a mother who had finally reached her limit. That night, after Lily and Ethan were asleep, I sat Mark down. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. I recounted the incident with the Lego, the silent tears, the utter disregard David had shown. Mark listened, his jaw tightening with each word. "He has to go, Peyton," he said, his voice laced with an uncharacteristic hardness. "I can't watch our kids suffer anymore." The next morning, I called my mother. This time, there was no gentle plea, no hesitant explanation. "Mom," I started, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "David has to leave. He's yelling at the kids, he's making them scared, and it's not fair to them." There was a pause on the other end, a moment of stunned silence. Then the familiar refrain. "Peyton, you're being too hard on him. He's struggling." "I am not being too hard on him, Mom," I interrupted, my voice rising. "He is an adult, and he is creating an intolerable environment for my children in their own home. I love David, he's my brother, but I love my children more. And I will not allow them to live in fear." I laid out the facts, the incidents, the way the kids had changed. I described Lily's silent tears over a dropped Lego. I told her how Ethan wouldn't play loudly anymore. And then, I delivered the ultimatum. Either he finds somewhere else to go, or Mark and I will have to set a date for him to leave. There was another, longer silence. I could hear my mother taking a shaky breath. "Peyton, please, he has nowhere to go." "Then you need to help him find somewhere, Mom. We can help with resources, but he cannot stay here any longer." This isn't up for debate. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had with her. I could hear the heartbreak in her voice, the conflict between her loyalty to David and her love for me. But for the first time, I didn't back down. This wasn't about pleasing her anymore. This was about protecting my family. The air hung heavy with the weight of my words, a silence that felt both terrifying and liberating, as if I had finally cleaved through a suffocating fog. The days that followed were a blur of intense emotion and logistical planning. My mother, though clearly hurt, did finally, reluctantly, start to help. She arranged for David to stay with a distant cousin for a few weeks, a temporary solution while they explored other options. David, when confronted with the news, reacted with a mixture of anger and sullen resignation. He packed his bags in silence, avoiding eye contact. There were no apologies, no expressions of understanding. Just a cold, almost resentful departure. The moment the front door closed behind him, a palpable shift occurred in our house. It was as if a heavy, invisible blanket had been lifted. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The tension that had coiled around us for months slowly began to unravel. The change in Lily and Ethan was almost instantaneous. Within days, their laughter returned, echoing through the halls. Ethan started running around again, his boisterous energy back in full force. Lily resumed her singing, her voice a sweet melody that had been absent for far too long. They still asked about Uncle David sometimes, their questions laced with a hesitant curiosity. I explained in simple terms that he needed to find his own space, and that sometimes even family members need to live apart to be happy. I avoided bad-mouthing him, choosing instead to focus on the positive changes in our home. My relationship with my mother remains complex. We talk, but there's a subtle distance now, a lingering sadness in her voice when David's name comes up. I know she still worries about him, and I understand that. But I also know that I made the right choice. My priority, above all else, is the well-being of my children and the sanctity of our home. It was a painful lesson, one that taught me the true meaning of boundaries and the unwavering strength of a mother's love. It taught me that sometimes protecting the ones you love means making incredibly difficult decisions, even if those decisions break the hearts of others, including your own. A new dawn broke over our home, not just with the rising sun, but with the quiet promise of rediscovered joy and the gentle reweaving of the tapestry of our family life, now stronger and more vibrant than before. Life now, almost 4 months after David moved out, is a breath of fresh air. Our home is truly ours again, filled with the sounds of happy children, not hushed whispers. Lily and Ethan are thriving, their vibrant personalities fully restored. The fear has vanished from their eyes, replaced by the carefree sparkle of childhood. Mark and I have reconnected, the strain of David's presence no longer a wedge between us. We're stronger, more united, and deeply grateful for the peace we fought so hard to reclaim. David is still living with our cousin, and from what I hear, he's still unemployed. My mother still makes her gentle appeals for understanding, but now, I listen with empathy, but without guilt. The key lesson I learned from this whole ordeal is simple, yet profound. You are the guardian of your home and your family's peace. Sometimes, protecting that peace means drawing incredibly difficult boundaries, even with those you love. It means prioritizing the emotional well-being of your children above all else, even if it means causing discomfort or disappointment to others. It means understanding that sometimes, love isn't about enabling, but about holding people accountable for their actions and their impact on others. This journey was painful, filled with tears and conflict, but it ultimately led us to a place of greater strength, clarity, and peace. If you're reading this, if you're living in a similar situation, know that you are not alone. Your feelings are valid, and your desire for a peaceful home is not selfish. You have the power to create the sanctuary your family deserves. What boundaries are you struggling to set in your own life? What steps can you take today to reclaim your peace? Remember, your well-being, and the well-being of your loved ones, is worth fighting for. Our family weathered a storm and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, rooted deeper in the love and respect we have for one another. We found our way back to joy, one quiet, peaceful moment at a time.